Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the She Is podcast. Today, I get to sit down and have a conversation with Kim. And Kim, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name before we began. So, would you help me out with that?
Sheahan.
Sheahan. Okay, I would have pronounced it totally wrong. So, thank you for that. So while looking like she had it all together from the outside, Kim used to spend most of her time wishing for death. She spent much of her youth and 20s living in a space of not feeling good enough and trying to take care of everyone but herself. Through her own journey, Kim found hypnotherapy and now helps others find transformation and healing by unlocking their inner power. So, Kim, I will let you take it away and share your story with us.
Yeah, so as you said, there was that component of really spending a lot of time just wishing to not be here on this earth, even when externally my life looked okay. And the funny thing is that wishing for death every day wasn't actually enough pain for me to go about healing myself.
Oh, wow.
That wasn't my trigger for healing, to be honest. It was a component of it that eventually it built up, and I had all those beliefs, but I just thought that was kind of how life was and you suffered through it. And
Holy smokes. I can't, like,
yeah,
that's really, really, because, like, I've never been really in such a dark space of wanting death. So, like, for me, for someone that hasn't been there, to try to wrap my mind around, like, those thoughts of death not being enough to want to change, want to transform, want to shift, that's such a wild thing to try to wrap your head around.
it is. And honestly, it wasn't until recently I was kind of prepping for a talk to give that I put it together in my own thoughts that way, of realizing that, yeah, I spent a lot of time just wishing, like, I was never what I would call actively suicidal, where I would make plans and want to end it myself. There was too much guilt for that. Oh God, I couldn't actually just take myself off the planet. But you'd spend a lot of time wishing for a car wreck or to just not wake up, any number of ways of just wishing for something external to make it be over.
Wow, something just to wipe you out, just take you out.
Yep.
You know, no longer had to deal with any of the, oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had I mean, you were in those thoughts, those dark moments. What what did that lead to?
So what it led to was eventually I got out of a really terrible relationship with a narcissist. And that was like the really darkest point in my late 20s, of just kind of being completely hollow. And from there, I started to actively rebuild my life. I did do some therapy at that point, and it helped a bit, like doing talk therapy, but it just kind of like took off the surface level of things. And it wasn't till I hit 32 and developed a chronic illness that I actively went searching for anything that would help, because the doctors couldn't do much. I had something called vestibular migraines, and the doctors said, it's not a tumor. Here's some drugs. Good luck. And I'm
Mm,
like, okay. Like I was in constant episodes of vertigo, like a dizziness, nausea, like sensitivity to everything, lights, sounds, where I just couldn't function in the world. I dragged my butt to work part-time and came home and sat on the couch. And that was my life for a good 8-10 months. And then, yeah, that's when I actually stumbled into hypnotherapy, because I'm like, I'll try anything at this point. Like that was the pusher, was having something physical wipe me out. And really for myself, it was what's known as a psychosomatic illness, where all that emotional stress and trauma becomes physical, and it comes into a physical illness.
yeah.
And so healing the mental aspect is actually what helped me heal my body.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so funny. I've had so many conversations with different women over the course of like the last 2 to 3 weeks for podcast interviews. And there have been so many of them talking about, like how they've run into different like illnesses or diseases or what have you. And so many of them have gone down this alternative path to healing because, when they go to a Western doctor, Western physician, whatever, like so often there's just this band-aid layer of things put on it, and we don't really get to the root of what's actually going on.
Yeah, our medicine has very much separated the body from the mind aspects, and we don't deal with it as a whole. And that's what we need to be doing. So having these complementary services like hypnotherapy, acupuncture, all these different things, like it's funny that when you get something like cancer, some of the first things they tell you to do is go to a vegan diet and get acupuncture. But yet those aren't preemptive things that doctors tell us about.
Yeah. It's all when it happens, we'll take care of it then, but not like, yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so hypnotherapy or your illness is what led you to the hypnotherapy. Would you be open to talking about your narcissistic relationship any further?
Sure. I'm very open book, so.
I would totally love to have that conversation, because I think there's so many people that are in relationships like that and at the same time don't know how to get out.
Yeah, it's a hard one. I spent my time just really wishing to not be here those last probably 90 days of that, 6 months of that relationship, to be honest, instead of doing something about it. Like that was more my solution because I was so hollow and empty inside. Like I would think of myself as a shell, like, just a thin layer and nothing left inside.
Wow.
And it was finally, the funny point was I was at work. I used to be a tax accountant. So Saturday at work in March, and I was supposed to go to his place that night. And just the thought of him touching me again was finally the enough trigger. Like, I was like, I cannot have him touch me again. Like, and that was enough and I did it like via text, and I just said, I'm going to come get my stuff and be gone. And luckily he let me this time because I had tried this about 6 weeks earlier to leave and it didn't work. He sucked me back in. But that was the final, it's like, I cannot do this. I can't live this way anymore.
What was his reaction to that text? Like when I think of a narcissistic, like being with someone that has such a personality, like I would think like, oh yeah, what was his reaction to that text?
I think because of the previous kind of breakup attempt, he was maybe a little more towards it. He just, at that point, he just accepted it. He was like, I'll just not be at the house. And because I had a key to his place, like we still had separate places. So luckily didn't live together. And I just had some stuff I needed to grab. And so luckily he just chose to not be there and let me go grab my stuff and disappear. And so like, I think he knew at some level it wasn't good for him either. Like it was just at such a tension point. And
yeah. Wow. Okay. Okay, so it was after that you started noticing the symptoms of the illness, correct?
No, that was actually, it was a few years. So there's a gap between leaving. So yeah, leaving him and then finally for the first time, actually the next 2 years, enjoying my life in a way I never had, because I'm a serial monogamist where, you're in one relationship after another.
Yeah.
And so I did that through most of my 20s. I was the too adult of a person in my early 20s instead of enjoying life. And so my late 20s is actually where I started having fun. I got into rock climbing, just hanging out, going out with friends. My therapist encouraged me to date around a little bit, which I kind of did, but it still weird for me.
Yeah, for sure.
And but it was a good time where I just spent like 2 years by myself. Like I dated, but I wasn't with anyone seriously. And it was a good time just to start repairing myself from all the damage that my relationships had done, because that gaslighting, that loss of trust in yourself, like that's the biggest thing with a narcissist, is you just don't trust yourself anymore because they teach you not to trust yourself, plus accepting all that responsibility of everything is your fault, even if it's not. So just having to break through those types of thought patterns. But they showed up in my work life, and that's where things just kept getting worse at work. Because, tax accountant, like that industry is terrible. It's a terrible industry. It's a terrible form of business. Like just the way it's set up kills people. And so like I had the anxiety from my relationship, and then that carried into work. And so what happened was I was starting to get out of that industry, because I just realized it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I've been doing this for over 10 years. I'm done. And so that was kind of the universe. I feel like the illness showed up at that point when I was like, what's next? And that was the universe telling me hypnotherapy, like, because now it's my career. Like I get into that. I do high performance consulting and getting through people's yuck in their brains so that they can have positive thoughts, like going from hating yourself, wishing to die, every negative thought all the time, to actually having an inner coach in your mind. Like I have a positive voice back here now. I couldn't have imagined that ever happening in my life.
That is like two opposite ends of the spectrum, which is amazing. Like that you started at one end and came out on the other. Like that's incredible. That period of time, that 2 years where you really just spent time with yourself. What was your biggest takeaway in that time?
Probably the biggest takeaway was actually learning who I was and what I liked, because I didn't have the control and decision making in the relationships I was in. I wasn't in charge. It might have looked like at times like I did stuff, but that was more like the management of a lifestyle, not the being in charge of it emotionally. And so it's like simple things like getting to set the thermostat.
Oh, wow.
Like, oh, this is what's comfortable for me, instead of that's what's comfortable for you, and I deal with clothing to adjust.
Wow.
So like just stuff like that, and getting to figure out, what did I like? What did I want? Seeing what didn't work in a relationship and knowing like I needed complete opposites of that, and still not quite knowing that I really needed to do my own healing work to get there. I met my now husband before I got my illness. So I met him as a friend for a while in that 2-year period. And then towards the end of it, we got together. Okay. So who I was at the beginning of our relationship is completely different than now. And luckily he has been a person that gave me that space to grow and grew with me and was accepting of change and growth for us. And so now we have an amazing relationship because I've gotten all that crap out of my head.
Yeah.
And we can just be us together instead of like me worrying about so much stuff in the relationship. Like, am I doing this right? Is he going to be mad at me? Oh God, I slipped up. What's going to happen now? Like, I was never physically abused, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it had happened.
Okay. If you would have like maybe stayed longer or.
Yeah, I can't say that that would have made me leave.
Wow.
At the point I was at and when it would have probably happened, like there was always kind of an underlying threat because that guy was a very angry person that it could have happened. And I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't actually put in that space. I'd like to think that yes, but knowing how I was then, I could have very well been a person who accepted it as my fault that, oh, he hit me because I did something wrong. Like I was in that frame of mind.
Wow.
And so, yeah, coming into a space of my husband now having to deal with me being in that fear space, like reacting that way. He'd never been with someone who'd been emotionally abused. He had a much more emotionally whole life as a child, happier, go lucky, and all of that, and just getting to be himself. And so there's just that component of like, he's like, I can't fathom what you went through. And I really have to bring him into my perspective at times to get him to see and understand, like, here's where I'm coming from. He's like, holy crap, how did you even get through all of that?
Wow, what a learning experience for him, like being in relationship with you. Like, wow. Wow. Um, oh, sometimes I'm having these conversations and I just want to process what you guys are saying. So then like I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I ask next? What next? Where do I go from here? Like,
It's all right. Take all the time you need to process. I'm all about processing.
right? Oh my gosh, I'm such a processor too. Like, holy smokes. Um, okay, so you ended up doing hypnotherapy for yourself. What was that experience like?
It was, oh, it's really finding yourself under the layer of crap.
So many layers for all of us,
Yeah.
I think, and all different layers. Like none of us have the exact same layer ever. So like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different layers, and each thing has a layer to, like, my mind always goes to the quote from Shrek, ogres are like onions. Like that is like always when I think of layers, I can't help but think of that
that is
scene from the
so
movie.
funny.
But healing really is in layers. Each thing is in layers. So you may deal with it this year, and then 1 to 5 years later, it might pop up in a different way because you have to deal with it on a deeper layer.
Yes. Yes.
And so hypnotherapy like helps you just start processing through those layers. Like you have the form I did originally for my own healing was called cellular release therapy.
Okay.
And you're in hypnosis, and basically the therapist role is asking you a bunch of yes and no questions, and you have your fingers set to a yes and no finger, and you're just like, can you release this? Can you let this go? And you would have talked about things ahead of time.
Okay.
So you just start releasing stuff, and it's has a physical effect on you. Like it releases from the cells in your body, much like a massage in a way. Like the energy in our bodies is held that way. And when you work with the subconscious in hypnosis, you can actually release that out of you. And so, yeah, I did a lot of that type of work, and I originally got that training as well for that form of hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
But I started to find some limitations with it because it's all about the removing things, like removing stuff from the subconscious. But if you don't give the subconscious something to hold on to and replace it with,
Yeah.
it kind of just circles back faster to the thing, and it takes longer to get through it. So I went and got way more training and other stuff. And now I focus not only on releasing for the clients and myself, it's replacing it with positive affirmation. So a big portion of the work I do is just creating, what do you want your life to look like? What script do you want in your subconscious? Like it's kind of like updating the programming in your computer is how I think of it.
Yeah. Ooh, that's fun. Do you have any like, I don't know, any success stories that really stand out to you that you're just like, that was so amazing to witness?
All of them.
I was
But
just gonna
one
say,
of
you're probably
my
like, yeah, all of them, duh.
some of my favorites, like the core of it is watching people start to trust themselves again.
That's such a
Because
big thing in life is trusting yourself.
like society takes that from us from youth. Like
Yeah.
it wipes out your trust, period. And
Yeah.
then throughout life, it might wipe it out even more. But yeah, so part of it is really, a lot of people know what they want, they know what they need. When I see people in depression, it's often because they know what they need to do, but they're resisting it. I know it was the same way for me when I was in my darkest moments, is because I needed to have that change that I was resisting.
Yeah.
And as soon as I made the change, like I had a client who had been in a terrible job for 10 years, just afraid to leave it. We worked together a few sessions, started applying, got a new job somewhere, had chronic neck pain for years. 2 weeks into the new job, the pain just disappeared.
Oh God, I love that so much. Oh
Yeah.
yes. Yes. I think, like going back to like the depression, for example, and like the trust issue and knowing what you need to do, but then having this fear of doing the thing because, like you said, like our trust is taken away from us and all of these expectations that are laid upon us as we like go through life. So then when our knowing, our intuition does kick in and we know what we have to do, it becomes this big scary thing when it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Change is scary, unfortunately. It's not what we know, it's different. And what we know is comfortable for a reason, but a lot of that survival methods we developed in childhood. And at a certain point, they no longer serve you. You don't have to be in that survival situation. And so, like, every adult needs to do some level of healing, no matter, you could have the best parents ever, and still the child will develop something because that's just how children's minds work. They deduce information. So they could decide in a split instant of something that seems like an innocent situation, they might decide something about themselves from that.
Yeah.
That isn't positive. Like, it's like, oh, the kid after school, the other kids were getting hugs and I didn't today. I must not be lovable. And it could be like that one split second. So kids, that's just how our minds work at that age. And you could be having a bad day as a kid and that's what happens. But then that not lovable sticks with you for the rest of your life until you process it and figure out like, no, I am lovable and I deserve love and I'm actually pretty fantastic. And people really just should know me and not the shell, all the shoulds, the should layer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Um what has been what's been your biggest lesson leading up to this very moment?
I think really that showing up as myself is the most important thing I can do in life.
Yes.
Because we're all unique. We're all here for a purpose and a reason. And I have gifts to share with the world, as does everyone. And if I'm not being me, I can't share those gifts. Like I spread amazing healing work in this world now instead of tax returns and, ignoring that. Like I had inklings of that kind of work being in my future in my 20s that I took the safe path. I remember having a tarot reading that I kind of did myself, like an intuitive download that was like, you're at a juncture right now and you can either choose to go the more intuitive, holistic route or the safe business route. And I fell into the safe business route and that's where I went. It was comfortable.
Yeah.
And then a decade later, circled back to where I was meant to be.
Yep.
But at the same time, all the things I've learned along the way have helped me now where I can serve my clients in such a broader range, because I don't just do the hypnotherapy, I do coaching work as well and consulting with them in business owners and career paths because I've been down those tracks. And so now I can help in those areas as well. So some of it was, I almost feel like I needed that world and that education and the flip side of it for people who maybe want to take that leap from the safe career into what they know they should be doing. I meet a lot of people in that situation. It's like, oh, okay, well, here's what I did. Here's an example. It does work out.
Yeah. I love that you touched on, like that you think you needed probably that education and those experience first before getting here, because I was going to ask you, like, if you hadn't taken the safe route and you would have went down the holistic route back then, if you think you would have, like, I don't know if it would have been a similar No, I feel like it probably wouldn't have been a similar experience, but like if you would have had maybe the same passion and drive for it as you do now.
I don't know. Parallel universe can tell you.
Totally. Yeah, I feel that absolutely.
Yeah. I think I'd be in a different space with it, but I don't
Yeah.
know that I would have ended up in Colorado. I don't know that I would have ended up in the same form of intuitive work. I just don't know I would have met my husband. Like there's so many aspects of my path that it's like looking back, some of them were really hard and really terrible.
Mhm.
But having those lessons and doing that healing work makes me more powerful in what I do now.
Yes. Yes.
And so while the journey sucked, at the same time, the journey is part of the process. So
Mhm. Yep. Hindsight.
yeah.
It all worked out so well.
Yeah, it did. And it's like, yeah, I wouldn't want to ever do it again if I can avoid it.
Yes. Yes.
But being on the other side of it now is like, oh, okay, this is pretty fantastic. And now I have a powerful story to share with people. I
Yep.
have powerful work I can share with them. And it just means so much more in a way to me because of that journey
Yeah.
of going from the one, complete 180 in beliefs and values and where I was in my mind and even my physical body.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sitting down with me, sharing your story, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, sharing you fully. I appreciate you so much. And I will be sure to link all of Kim's information, her socials, I think you gave me a website, all of that in the show notes. So if you feel compelled to connect with her, you can do so. Thank you so much, Kim, for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Absolutely.